Life is like a candy cane here in Duckburg. Snowflakes present Santa's sleigh. It's a duckler.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Christmas Carol Countdown. Today I'm going to be talking about something that's not really an adaptation of the Dickens classic. However, it is kind of Christmas Carol adjacent, so I feel like it can count. I've done a couple of Alice in Wonderland adjacent movies in my Wonderland Wednesday series, like Phoebe in Wonderland and that Jabberwocky movie, so I feel like this one has enough Christmas Carol content that it can count as well. In this episode, we're going to be looking at an episode of the new DuckTales series called Last Christmas, which on its own is not really a Christmas Carol adaptation. However, there are a number of allusions and references to Mickey's Christmas Carol, which I reviewed last year with my cousin Shana and Sarah, and I feel like these references are significant enough that I thought it would make for an interesting episode of this series. There are also several references to other Disney and or Disney Duck media, which I'll point out if I catch them, and I'm sure there's even more than what I caught. Longtime viewers of my channel know that I've reviewed several episodes of the 2017 DuckTales series in the past. I was initially planning to review every episode as a main series on my channel, but it just got kind of too hard to keep up with the series, and I felt like I was just recapping the episodes more than reviewing them, so I just gave up. But I still really like the show, so I thought it would be really fun to do another video on it for old time's sake, since it totally fits into the theme of this series. So before we begin, I don't know how much I need to point this out, because this is probably common knowledge, but Scrooge McDuck, the main character of the DuckTales series, is literally named for the main character of the Dickens story. Sometimes I don't know if I know something because I read too much about things I'm a fan of, or if it's because it's something that everyone knows, so I thought I'd throw that in here on the very off chance that you didn't know. I'm sure you did, but I'd like to think that I may have just blown one single viewer's mind who'd never made that connection before. I guess his name sort of counts as a Christmas Carol reference, but it's been a reference since the creation of the character in 1947, so take it as you will. It's definitely not the main reference for this episode, though. It's really one of the most minor ones. There are many more significant references to come, but the fact that his name is Scrooge is used as a plot point later in the episode, so I thought I'd mention it. Anyway, this episode begins with Scrooge being a Scrooge, and yelling at Donald for putting up Christmas lights and getting angry at the abundance of decor that has taken over his home. This is mainly due to the fact that there have been hints throughout the new series that he has some kind of unspoken issue with Santa Claus. There have been previous episodes hinting at some kind of long-standing feud between them, and maybe Scrooge thinks he's evil, but no backstory or explanation has ever been given. This scene also gives us Scrooge's iconic catchphrase.
Bah, humbug.
He said it!
Later that night, Dewey is sitting alone, wistfully looking at a picture of his family, including his mom, from before the triplets were born. And for those unfamiliar with the series, Huey, Dewey, and Louie's parents have been out of the picture since before they were born, with the first season finale revealing their mother was actually still alive and living on the moon after her spaceship crashed there years ago. Don't ask. It's a cartoon. We just go with it. Donald tries to get him to join the rest of the family to sing Christmas carols, but Dewey isn't feeling up to it, so he leaves him alone. Suddenly he sees a green light coming from Scrooge's window on the other side of the mansion, so he goes to investigate, and it is here we get our biggest reference to A Christmas Carol yet, as Dewey discovers that his Uncle Scrooge is being visited by the three spirits from the story. And not just any version of the story, these are semi-direct references to Mickey's Christmas Carol. The ghost of Christmas Past is a cricket, though definitely not Jiminy Cricket, as he was in the original. And the ghost of Christmas Present, well, he is not Willie the Giant from Mickey and the Beanstalk like he was in Mickey's Christmas Carol. He is dressed suspiciously like Willie, and has just about as many, or as few, brain cells as Willie the Giant had in the original story. The Ghost of Christmas Future is probably the biggest stretch here, because this is definitely not Pete, and Dewey actually thinks that he's Death, come to claim his Uncle Scrooge, because last season it's revealed that his Uncle Scrooge is, impossibly old, having been born well over 100 years ago, sometime in the mid-1800s. But while Dewey initially thinks they're there to collect his uncle, it turns out they just come to visit Scrooge every year. They say they actually met Scrooge when they were on their way to visit a different Scrooge. Wink. But they found this one to be a lot more fun, so they just kept coming back. Every year they visit Scrooge and take him into the past to visit all the best parties in history. It turns out Scrooge doesn't even hate Christmas like he pretends to. He acts like he hates Christmas so that everyone will leave him alone, and then he can leave with the three spirits without anyone even noticing he's gone. But he still hates Santa, though.
That churlish chimney chaser is not to be trusted!
Dewey agrees to cover for him, and the three spirits take Scrooge into the night, with Past delivering one of his famous lines as they take off.
Take heed, rise, and walk with me!
Using the Spirit of Christmas Past's magical timebrella, which is the instrument that the magical Jiminy Cricket version of the character carried. I don't think his umbrella was the source of his powers, but here it is, which will be important later. The four of them end up at a party from Scrooge's past. When they get there, his younger self doesn't seem the least bit fazed by his presence, which is a major departure from the original story, where the time travel was only with shadows of the past. Here, they actually time travel to Scrooge's own past. Present and future leave Past and Scrooge to go mingle, but Scrooge doesn't have a good time at all because he is besieged by people who think he's the younger version of himself and just want his time and or money. He asks to go home, but Past convinces him to stay, until eventually the mansion is actually robbed by the Beagle Boys, and he really wants to leave. The spirit convinces him to take one more trip, even further back, to before he'd amassed his fortune, back to his first Christmas in Duckburg, where he'd apparently lived in a tent, because when they get there, all they find is a tent and a campfire. Scrooge initially enjoys the quiet compared to the party they'd come from, but he's soon bored and wants to go home and be with his family for Christmas instead. However, Past is not so accommodating.
No.
What's that now?
Every year I spend my Christmas showing selfish ingrates the true meaning of Christmas, only to be ditched the following year because they have to look after Tiny Tim or whatever.
He thought Scrooge was different because he actually wanted to spend time with them, but now that his family has moved in with him, Past is afraid that it's only a matter of time before he completely ditches them for his family at Christmas, which is why he brought him so far back so they could be alone, and not even his fellow spirits could stop them from reliving this particular Christmas over and over and over, which is a really stupid plan. If you want to spend time with someone, don't essentially kidnap them and force them to be with you, or they'll just end up hating you. I don't know how well Past thought this through. Anyway, Scrooge fights with him and eventually succeeds in stealing his timebrella and pops it open, heading back to the future, leaving the Spirit of Christmas Past all alone in the past. Meanwhile, back in the future, when the spirits are initially leaving with Scrooge, Dewey decides to tag along, grabbing onto Future's robe, and then accidentally losing his grip, falling down and landing in the 90s, when his mother and Uncle Donald were still teenagers. Dewey goes to look for his mom and instead finds emo teen Donald, who is voiced by Rusty Taylor, the original voice of all the Duck children in the original series, and convinces him to help him find Della, who may be missing. They are suddenly attacked by a Wendigo, who chases them through the woods around the mansion until they are caught in one of Della's Santa traps.
Just had to trip one of my Santa traps. One day I'll catch that ho-ho hooligan and give Uncle Scrooge the best Christmas gift ever.
As Della tries to free them, they hear the Wendigo roaring, and Della tells them that the legends of the Wendigo say that it's a poor soul transformed into a monster by obsession and desperation. Donald yells at her to hurry up and calls her Dumbella, which is another reference and is actually the name given to Huey, Dewey, and Louie's mother in the original 1938 short, where the triplets were left with Donald, with only a note from their mother. Dewey gets Donald to apologize just in time for her to free them as the Wendigo emerges from the woods, revealing that it's actually looking for Scrooge, to the surprise of no one. The three of them work together to defeat the Wendigo, and once it's been apprehended, Donald exclaims, another reference to the original DuckTales series. They drag the monster to the house, and before they go get Scrooge, Della and Donald reveal that they already know that Dewey is a relative from the future.
Please, we're the Duck family. This is only like the fourth weirdest thing that's happened to us on Christmas.
Dewey tries to warn them that Della is eventually going to disappear, but they refuse to listen for fear of damaging time. Once the two of them have gone inside, the Wendigo breaks free, but before it can do anything, Scrooge falls down on it, taking it out and reuniting with Dewey. He'd been flying back through time with the other two spirits when he spotted Dewey and stopped to save him. Dewey tearfully asks if they can go home, which moves the Wendigo, who turns to stone and breaks apart, revealing the ghost of Christmas Past inside. He'd apparently been wandering the woods for decades looking for Scrooge, and had eventually been consumed by his obsession and desperation, becoming the Wendigo. Scrooge returns past Umbrella, and the five of them fly back to the present, where there's a big family Christmas waiting for them. Donald hugs Dewey and tells him, "Welcome back," implying that he remembers meeting him as a kid, and realized that this must have been the night that he'd gone back in time. Meanwhile, on the moon, Della looks down to Earth and wishes her family a Merry Christmas, saying, "See you soon," and begins welding something together, implying that she may have found a way to return to Earth. As the credits roll, we get one final Mickey's Christmas Carol reference in the form of illustrations that look extremely similar to the ones in the credits for Mickey's Christmas Carol. This is not only an intentional, obvious nod to those illustrations, but they're actually by the same artist. Michael Peraza Jr. did the illustrations in both the opening credits of Mickey's Christmas Carol and the closing credits of this episode, which I thought was really cool of the DuckTales crew to bring him back for that. So that's this episode. I really enjoyed it, both as an episode of DuckTales, working in some important plot information and hints about what might be in store for the future, as well as just being a great little story on its own. It's full of clever references to the series that this new show is based on, as well as many nods to Mickey's Christmas Carol. It was just an all-around fun time, and I highly recommend it both to fans of DuckTales as well as Mickey's Christmas Carol. Okay, well, I think that's going to be all for this episode. Next time, my friend Soul will be joining me, and we'll be talking about the 2009 CGI animated Disney version of the story, which, despite all appearances, is actually one of the most faithful adaptations of the source material that I have ever seen. We'll see you then. Bye.
Is the time for friends and family to gather round the fire. And when Christmas past is home at last, the bells will finally ring on Duckburg Christmas